I'm Brandon.
And I'm Brandon.
And today, we're pretty much wrapping up our summer of interviews, and with a very special guest. Kind of came out of nowhere, quite a surprise, and we've had some pretty awesome people on the show over the last few months, so it was going to be pretty hard to top everybody that we've spoken to. But as you guys remember our episode of Spider-Man Reign about 2 months ago, our little commentary on that, we are lucky enough to have Kaare Andrews with us today. Thank you, sir. How you doing?
Hey guys, how's it going? It is still shocking to me that people say my name properly now that I've recorded a couple of YouTube videos. My whole life has been spent not having anyone say my name properly. It takes me aback physically to hear it spoken properly.
It's something we're terrible at on the show too.
Yeah, surprisingly.
I was so happy to be like, okay, I can nail this. This is the name I can get for once, because there's some bizarre stuff all over the place out there.
And then I think when we read Spider-Man Reign, I was like, how do you pronounce this name, Brandon?
Yeah. No, I've got one of those names. Like when I grew up, it was Bill Sienkiewicz. And it was like, I was going to like Sienkiewicz. Like it was like, who knew?
I always say Sienkiewicz for some reason. I always say Bill Sienkiewicz.
I've heard like Sienkiewicz or something like that. I don't know.
I believe it's Sienkiewicz.
Sienkiewicz.
Well, see, now we're doing it. We're doing it right now, right?
It's like when you say a word too many times, you're just like, is that how you say it? Like, ketchup? Like, ketchup,
when I was a kid, it was also Magneto or Magneto. This is before the movies. So it was Submariner and Submariner. These were the names that people would stumble upon.
These were the playground battles that were going on.
Yeah, basically. You didn't have a smartphone to just casually look it up or go into Google Translate.
Totally.
You have so much. There's so much you do right now. You're a writer, an artist. You're doing films. You're a busy guy, and I know the whole writing and drawing aspect isn't an easy thing to do. But that's really what captivated me a few years ago when I came across Spider-Man Reign. Also, just the comparison to Dark Knight Returns and how dark Spidey got. And it's a great book. Can we start there and just where did that idea come from? How did you go about doing it? What was your intention with that book?
Well, my little son just walked in the room. How the book happened was I had wanted to immediately start writing as soon as I broke in as a penciler. I mean, I kind of grew up being a student of comic book creators, and I knew that once you establish yourself in one position, the world will treat you as that position, and it's very hard to kind of break past that position. So I probably could have broken in first as a colorist because I could do the coloring when not a lot of people could do the coloring, but I held back and broke in as a penciler. And then as soon as I broke in as a penciler, I knew I wanted to start writing because there's nothing worse at the time anyways. There's nothing worse than the penciler who always talked about wanting to write, but everyone knew him only as a penciler. And so I immediately knew that was something I wanted to get rid of as soon as possible. And how that happened was I broke in as a penciler. I could ink and color. And I wanted to do that as quickly as possible to show I could do that. And I was doing some covers. And back in the day, when you did a cover, I would have to pencil it, FedEx it to Marvel. They would FedEx it to the inker. He would FedEx it back to Marvel. They would FedEx it to the colorist. They would FedEx it back to Marvel. So, and there's always deadline problems. So it was pretty easy for me to just slip in, hey, I can ink this and save us 3 days just by me inking it myself. And at first they declined politely, and then this is probably from Ben Grimm and Logan. That's my first miniseries at Marvel, and I think by the second cover I inked it myself. I believe. I think I colored that first cover myself. Anyways, I became known very quickly as someone who could save days of time by being able to ink and color myself. So I was quickly given kind of. I offered them days of savings, and in return, they let me ink and color my own covers. And as soon as I did that, I slipped. I always wanted to paint, and I just painted a cover. I didn't ask. I don't believe in asking. I believe in just doing. So I just digitally painted a cover. I always wanted to paint in oils, but I didn't have the money to buy oils back then. So I had the computer, and I did kind of a digitally painted cover. It was a Spider-Man cover. And they really liked it. And then immediately I was like, well, I want to write too. And then my editor at the time was Axel Alonso. He was the Spider-Man editor back then.
Yeah.
And he had just started on Spider-Man, and I had just kind of I started the year before at Marvel, I think. So we kind of started about the same time at Marvel. He had come over from DC, from Vertigo. And he was like, listen, Kaare, a lot of artists want to write. It's very hard. It's very, it's trickier than you think. But I was like, well, I think I can, I want to try. And he was like, well, there is this anthology book. If you ever have an idea, it's a new Spider-Man thing. We're doing it. There may be a way to get you an issue. And so I just immediately wrote and did layouts for an issue of Spider-Man Tangled Web. And I knew if he read it as a comic book, if I drew the layouts, not just a script with words, but, my unnatural advantage as an artist is I can draw pictures. So if I could present him lettered layouts that he could read like a comic book, there would be no need for him to translate in his mind how it might look drawn. So he read it immediately and was like, oh, this is great. Sure. Yeah, let's do it. And so immediately I just, as soon as I entered Marvel, I just started trying to run as fast as I could, because I knew that was something that I'd have to break down those doors eventually. And it's always easy to break down those doors when you first arrive, like when you first get to the party, if you can just like say hi to everyone, and just like juggle and dance and be a maniac in 5 minutes, you'll have a better time at the party than, waiting an hour and then get your juggling balls out and waiting another hour and then hit the dance floor. Like, it's better just to make a fool of yourself immediately than to try to like creep in. So that's my advice to anyone who breaks in. If you want to break in, if you break in as a penciler specifically, if you want to write, just do it immediately. Just hit those. So how Spider-Man Marine happened was I ended up doing a one-shot of Spider-Man Mangaverse and a one-shot of Spider-Man Tangled Web. Spider-Man was always my favorite character, and I wanted to do a Spider-Man miniseries. And I just knew that there had always been tons of Spider-Man in the past. Spider-Man as a teenager, Spider-Man now. There just had never been a definitive Spider-Man of the future tale, besides maybe Spider-Man 2099. But that was like such a different version of the character. He wasn't Peter Parker. Like, it was a whole different character. So I knew that was untread ground, and I knew that was something I could pitch. And then as soon as I pitched it, it was probably 1 page, 2 page, just kind of an idea. Marvel really latched on to the idea of it being Dark Knight Returns for Spider-Man, like as a marketing, like, oh, we can run with this. Yeah. Like, they got excited. And that's always been one of my most favorite books. And so probably like, it was definitely something on my mind, the Dark Knight Returns of Spider-Man. It was a shorthand I used to pitch the book, I think, but it wasn't. It probably got closer to Dark Knight Returns than I had initially intended, just because of the way it all happened. But I try to address things head on. So in the book itself, I'm like, I name my reporters Varley and Miller, and I try to be unabashed with my influences, because I think there's this saying, and I've heard it attributed to many people from Picasso to whoever, but it's the idea that poor artists trace, good artists borrow, and great artists steal. And how that works is, if you're tracing another artist, you're not really learning anatomy, you're not really learning rendering, you're just kind of like going over someone's lines. And because you're only going over someone's lines, you'll miss lines. I don't know if you're of a kid, if you ever have these memories of tracing a picture, you take the page away and you're like, oh, I didn't trace the nose, or oh, I didn't trace the ear.
Yeah,
like,
totally, all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a shorthand to make a good drawing when you're 6, but then you're like, oh, I don't have an ear in this drawing. And then if you only borrow, well, you're constantly saying, well, I don't want to get too close to this drawing, so it better not be too much like it. And that's a limiting idea. Like, that's physically limiting what you're doing. So you'll always end up with subpar art, because you're just inherently limiting the process. But if you steal, you can absorb what you love, and you also give yourself permission to leave behind everything else. So you're actually, as a physical, mechanical action, giving yourself permission to exceed, or at least be free, or at least, without restriction. And that's the best way to do it, because you really want to, like, drawing is not an external process. It's not pushing out, it's drawing in. Like, you want to draw in everything you love, filter it through your mind, and then push out yourself. So I think steal from your favorite things all the time. Like it is, you should not be embarrassed about theft, because if it's good enough, you own it. And if it's not good enough, well, you're not good enough anyways. Like you need to work harder. So like theft only doesn't work if the quality is subpar. If the quality is great, look at the great thing about comic artists, you can trace like McFarlane to Michael Golden or Jessica Campbell to Art Adams or Jim Lee to John Byrne. Like you can trace the theft. And all my favorite artists, I can tell you exactly where they stole from. And it's always amazing because, look at Tarantino's to Scorsese. Like he stole from Scorsese, but because he stole it, he got to own it. And then he comes up with his own thing. Like Scorsese would never make Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but Scorsese would never make Kill Bill. Like for sure, he would never make Kill Bill. So I think this idea of theft is actually the shortcut to doing like your best work.
That's really true and fascinating. What were you gonna say, Brandon?
Yeah, no, I was gonna say the funny thing is like with comic books, I feel like it's almost unavoidable because these characters, at least for the superhero genre, that these are characters that have existed at this point like 80 years, right? So you're building upon the previous generation. I mean, one example real quick that like the Spider-Man one, he's building off of influences from The Dark Knight Returns, but at the same time, it's also building upon like the mythos of Spider-Man too, and like I'm pretty sure there's borrowed elements from previous runs, and like any superhero, if you've read a superhero comic, there's always references to whether it be a storyline or the art style or any sort of character. I mean, the amount of things that you see in Daredevil repeated over and over from like Stan Lee to Frank Miller and so on, like it's one of those things. I think it's almost like kind of like a tradition in a way. Like I think what you're talking about is there's a shared consciousness, what Carl Jung might call a shared consciousness or an archetype. And like we draw from the same well of civilization. And even Spider-Man, that costume was stolen from a kid's costume that was being sold when they made that character. I forget the name of it, but you can Google it. Just look at the original Spider-Man inspiration Halloween costume. It's a Halloween costume that they stole and turned into his costume. But because they stole it, I did not know that.
Yeah, Google it right now. It's pretty funny.
Yeah,
I got the loud keyboard for it too.
Yeah, do it, man, do it. But I think like I'm so interested in archetypes, and I'm so interested in shared consciousness. I think the real power is what we share. And if we share something, well, can you really steal it? Like truth, a shared truth. Like, how can you steal that? Like, and I think that the greatest power in superheroes specifically is that they have some kind of embodied unity, like in humanity. Like it used to be Greek gods. It used to be like, all these archetypes, gods for Norse gods or Greek gods or whatever. We've kind of got rid of all the gods these days. But in their place, now we have these superheroes that often perform the same function, like whether it's Mercury to Flash or Hercules is Thor or whatever. Like there is some reason why we're interested in these heroic archetypes.
Yeah, I heard a YouTube channel. I always forget the name of it, and I've always wanted to pay credit to him. But with all the comic book videos I watch, I can't remember. It blurs together. But they call them modern mythologies. And it makes sense, like how these superheroes are like the modern mythologies of the modern age.
Yeah, and I don't think it's any coincidence that it's at a time when, as a society, we're at our least religiousness. And I know I said in the beginning I don't want to talk about politics or religion, but like as an archetype, like we don't. Like there was a time in the world where everywhere you go, there'd be like, if you were in a Christian country, there'd be crosses and the churches would be the biggest buildings and everyone would be like crosses around their necklaces. Now, what's on those buildings? It's Spider-Man. What they're wearing T-shirts of Spider-Man. Yeah. It's like the biggest buildings are like like the movie theaters. It's like we've kind of like we need these heroic archetypes, and in today's world, superheroes are filling that gap.
Yeah, 100%. That's why I didn't do well in some of my classes, because I was like, "This is Batman we're talking about." Like, you guys realize that, And they were just like, "That's a comic book, dude. Like, don't worry." Now it's just so contemporary, and it's flooded. With the Marvel movies, everything transformed and changed. And when we were still growing up, comic books still weren't like cool for a lot of people. But now it's so crazy seeing how much it's just evolved and taken over and consumed everybody.
Oh yeah, man. When I was a kid, I'm probably a little older than you guys. When I was a kid, it was like a social at a certain age. There was a social cost for reading comic books.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. It was one thing to like the cartoons or watch the movie, whatever movie was available at the time. At least for me, about 25 years ago to 20 years ago, I think the biggest thing was, I think, X-Men movies and like the Spider-Man movies about 20 years ago.
Yeah, Bryan Singer, the X-Men movies.
Yeah, exactly. And the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. That was like, it was cool to like those, but to actually read the comics, everyone's like, "Oh, that's a thing still? I thought those were long gone." That I've literally heard that be like as a conversation starter, like, "Oh, those are still around?"
Totally.
Side note, I found the costume. You were right. Comic enthusiasts found a Spider-Man costume produced in 1954, 8 years before the first spin in a Marvel comic.
Dude, that's insane. I did not know that.
Or look at Batman, right? They stole Batman from the movie The Bat.
Oh yeah, I've seen that.
Or they stole the Joker from the movie The Man Who Smiles. Like these are outright thefts. But I think in that theft is actually, if it's done the right way, it's actually a good thing. Like in the olden days, painters would learn how to paint by replicating the masters. Like if in Florence, Italy, or whatever, you can still go to these schools where you learn how to paint by replicating the masters. And then at a certain point, if you're good, you find your own way forward. But you're stealing all the lessons you learned from other people, from other things, and then you're building upon them and putting a bit of yourself in the work as well.
Yeah, it's it's an evolution of everything. It's just the way mankind kind of works, in a very, like logical sense. Like we're all evolving, and seeing artwork evolve and these characters evolve, and making them last for as long as you do have to take what worked so well and was just like, how can I make this, for myself? How can I show my love and my passion for this character, for what Jack Kirby did for him, and Stanley, all that type of stuff. Like,
it's also one of those things that like it helps people be aware of your influences, right? Like someone looks at Spider-Man Reign and they go, "Oh, this is pretty cool," and then they read about it and they go, "Oh wow, Kaare was a huge fan of Frank Miller," and there's a lot of imagery and nods to Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns. So maybe I'll go check that out because I really like Spider-Man Reign. And then you read that and you go, "Wow, this is really awesome." And then you go, "Wow, this guy wrote Daredevil. Let me go read that now." And then, it becomes like this effect where you go down the line.
I think, the coolest thing about Spider-Man Reign, that like what really drew me in for it was, not only the homage to Dark Knight Returns, but I was just like, Frank Miller, wrote and drew Dark Knight Returns, and seeing you take that same path for this book, I thought that was just brilliant. Like if they would have had an artist and a separate writer, it wouldn't have had the same effect. But the fact that you took that route and owned it completely, it was just mesmerizing. And I think even the dramatic shift that you have with it, Miller starts off as a crime story to nuclear holocaust. Like yours has a very similar pattern, and the way the Venom comes out and you really own it to, an evolved Venom, something that we're finally getting to, is a character that has needed an evolution, and because he was kind of stagnant for a long time, I feel like. And
at that time specifically, he had kind of stagnated and kind of gone away. And then in my heyday of collecting was the McFarlane Spider-Man stuff with Venom. So for me, Venom was always like a real important part of the Spider-Man mythos. And I always thought it strange that Spider-Man kind of like took on board this parasite, and then just kind of like it was almost like a girlfriend a bit, almost like dating, living together in the same body. And at a certain point, he just like expels him off of his body, and there was like, this is an alien life form. This is something that probably has emotions and desires and an intellect, And to me, it just felt like, oh, they've never told that story before of like, how did Venom really feel about that rejection of like his partner, you know, his, not just his host, but they were living in the same body. It's like, you know, if it's like the ex-girlfriend, like, you know, that's kind of where I was. That's what I was inspired. Like, it's love, right? And love is like always that love is a dangerous thing when it goes the wrong way. You know, that idea just felt true, and I hadn't seen it before. So even though like there was a lot of the setup of Spider-Man Reign was very much influenced by Dark Knight Returns, the execution, I didn't feel any need to echo the pace or the plot points or anything like, or the characters or anything like that. Like,
oh yeah.
It kind of again, stealing the concept, and then it just freed me to go my own way at a certain point. So I think sometimes if people go in thinking it is the Dark Knight Returns of Spider-Man, I think they get let down because it's a totally different machine.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But you know, that's some of the dangers. But also is like, you know, that series was my first mini series that I wrote, and it was a long time ago. So I have a lot of fondness for it because of the time in my life where I made it. But as an artist, you're always embarrassed about your old work. It always feels so unpolished and raw and, you know, not grown. It's like looking at pictures of yourself in high school. It's like, it's always a bit embarrassing.
Yeah, no, for sure. I can understand.
Oh God, I wore that day.
Yeah. Or you see my haircut in high school. It's so bad.
Yeah.
I was rocking the hair past the shoulders in high school for me. So
nice.
It's honestly, and it's again one of those things before we switch topics, but what you did there was kind of ahead of anyone. Like what you're saying, there wasn't really a story where Peter was older. I don't feel like we really got that till Chip Zdarsky did Spider-Man Life Story, and we got to dive into that, and then an evolution and like dive into the Venom character. I feel like again, until like Donny Cates recently, we really haven't gotten that emotional breakthrough with Venom and those type of things. So I mean, dude, hats off to you and just coming up with all that and really analyzing these characters.
Probably part of the reason is like Spider-Man is a youthful archetype. Like that archetype. Like when I think of Spider-Man, just like I think of high school Spider-Man. Yeah. I don't think of even 22-year-old Spider-Man. I think of high school Spider-Man, Mary Jane, Flash Thompson. I don't even think of Gwen Stacy really. I just think of like he's in high school. He's, you know, and it's like that's the archetype. And for my new book, Amazing Fantasy, like I was very focused in like, oh, how do I play with that archetype without setting it in the 60s or even in the Mark Bagley 2000s? Like it was like the Bendis Ultimate Spider-Man stuff. Like it was very much, I'm very much interested in archetypes. It's like, I feel like in superheroes, because we tell so many stories every month and have been for 60 years or longer, depending on the character, you always have to iterate away from what has been done before. And there's such a focus in today's world about iterating away from a thing. I felt like there was a real opening, just like there was an opening to do Spider-Man as an older character. And how I did that, by the way, was I returned him to his archetype. So I was very important for me to, in Spider-Man Reign, make him a loner, make him a social outcast, take away his girlfriend, give him the same journey he took as a teenage, that archetypal journey, and have him relive it as an old man. So in today's world, I feel like every character is so focused on iterating outwards. Almost all characters are unrecognizable right now. There's such an opening.
Oh yeah.
I think like Amazing Fantasy, there's such an opening to do a World War II Captain America, a teenage Spider-Man, like a Russian spy Black Widow. And like for me, that was like, oh, I got to do this now before people realize that it's like you're playing football and you're like, oh, that's just like, I could just run, you know, you're the quarterback and you're like, oh, I'm going to pass here. I'm going to pass there. It's like, no, I can just run. Like no one's watching. I can just run right down the middle of the field and just play with the archetypes of these characters that I've always loved.
So Amazing Fantasy 1 just came out, for those who are listening. That was released this week. What can you tell me? What can we expect from this series? What brought it to life? what was your inspirations for it too?
Yeah, it really was this idea of like, I didn't know what to. I wanted to do a new Marvel project. I went away and did an image book for a little bit. Renato Jones, this guy who kind of like hunts the super rich and judges them for their super rich crimes. So that was like kind of a fun, very dark, very violent, like over the top, very crazy story. And I just felt a real yearning to deal with my favorite versions of my favorite characters. And I didn't know, like, should I do like a teenage Spider-Man story, or should I do a World War II Captain America story, or should I do something else? And I thought, well, what if there was a way to do all of it? Like, what if there was a way to take, even though they're in different timelines, take teenage Spider-Man, put him in the same story with World War II Captain America, and put them in the same story with like a Russian spy Black Widow. And I thought, well, those are different timelines, so I have to come up with a device to make them all kind of like meet up in the same place. And then I really started getting focused on like, Spider-Man was created in a book called Amazing Fantasy, and we've always explored the amazing, whether it's Amazing Spider-Man, which is what it became, but we haven't really explored the fantasy part of Amazing Fantasy and Spider-Man. So I have these weird ideas that float around in my head, and I thought, great, an island of fantasy that somehow teenage Spider-Man pops up on, World War II Captain America pops up on, and a Russian spy Black Widow pops up on, and then just kind of figure out what happens. Find a reason why they're there, and then do that. That was that's how it all happened, really.
And you're doing the covers for these, and they're very like Conan-esque and whatnot. Where does that influence come from? That Franzetta type of feel that you have going on there?
Total Franzetta. It was like, when I thought of like, what's the archetypal image of fantasy in my brain, if I would just immediately don't think about it too much. If it's the first thing that pops in my head, it's probably a Frazetta painting. Yeah. He owned that space in the 70s. I mean, I think I was too young to be into it back then, but if I just think of fantasy, it's just like Frazetta, boom. And so I became very interested in like, what, that's cool. What if I could do the covers in that kind of style that I haven't seen really in a long time before? It seems representational. These are like muscly, manly men. Like, where have right now in today's world, the stories with manly men, like muscular, savage beasts, men,
8 feet tall.
Yeah.
It's like, again, there's an opening, there's that vacuum, which is like, and I just thought, what if Captain America was basically Conan? Like, I just thought,
sick. It's so cool.
I just started showing these images of like Steve Rogers as just in beast mode with a beard, and it just was like, I don't overthink it. I just, if I get excited about a weird idea, I feel like I need to chase it out.
And it was like such perfect timing for me when I saw this too, because this entire year I've been kind of on a Conan binge and really getting to Ralph Bakshi and Fire and Ice and Wizards and stuff like that. And the solicitations for this came out that same month, and I saw the cover and I was like, this is just like fate at this point. Like, I need to check out this, and dude, they're such cool covers. Like, and I know they've released a few other ones with the solicitations, and that got me hyped about the series. Not even reading what it was about, it was just an immediate like, I love this vibe, and I'm already drawn. I'm already sold just by that cover. Like, it's gorgeous.
Yeah, and then I was gonna point out, I went to my comic shop this week, and I got the previews catalog, and Your Amazing Fantasy was there for number 3.
Yeah.
And the thing I realized when I was looking at it was that you're doing, you're writing, you're drawing, you're coloring, and you're doing your own variants. At least one of them.
Yeah. No, I'm doing my own variants for each of the issues. I'm doing at least one variant per issue for my own comic, which is a little weird.
That's a lot of work.
That's a lot of work. I was gonna say, side note, you did the covers for Death of the Inhumans, right?
Yeah.
Oh, dude, badass. Just want to point that out real quick. Shout out.
I do a lot of work as a variant cover artist. Like, I was kind of broke in. I kind of got known probably first for my covers. I did a Hulk run for about a year.
Yeah.
Where I did Hulk covers, and I did very weird covers. Like, at the time it was kind of a new thing where I was referencing pop culture. I did like a Norman Rockwell cover. I did a Corn Pops cover. I did like these covers that in today's world, you'd be like, oh, okay, that's kind of fun. I've seen that before. But back then it was like not not something you saw on a mainstream superhero book to reference a Norman Rockwell painting on the cover. So, but my editor at the time, Axel, like allowed me to do the weird stuff, and really he got jazzed and I got jazzed, and it was really fun. So I've always done variant covers, especially lately. Variant covers have become such a thing,
huge booming thing now.
Oh
Every
yeah,
book
totally.
has 3 or 4. Yeah.
Right. Well, and I'll tell you why, because I mean the best artists are no longer drawing the books. So
there you go.
Here's a weird thing. Like who would have expected a variant cover market would have taken place?
That's what blew me away. Sorry,
Yeah.
it's just the variant cover market is crazy.
Right, but why? Well, I'll tell you why. Because this is my idea. Maybe it's not true, but it's my feeling as someone who does these covers, is like there was a time when the best artists in comics drew the insides of the books, and those were the books I just loved the most.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever it was, I don't know, Travis Charest or Art Adams or whoever it was. Those books with that art, like comic books are a visual medium, and it takes probably at least 5 times long to draw the book as it does to write the book. And those artists all ran away and made Image Comics, and it kind of like, I think everyone kind of got mad at artists for a while, and then they were like, let's just do the writers. And all the artists kind of got devalued for a period of time. And what happens is you got these superstar writers with kind of like subpar interior art, but those amazing artists didn't go anywhere. They just needed a place to shine, and you get paid more to draw those covers and do the insides of the books. It's less work. You can make more, you can do more fun things and more experimental things. And so now all the best artists are doing comic covers, and because people have kind of like haven't been paying attention, no one's paid attention really, but like we still love the comic book art. We buy the comic books half for the art at least.
Yeah, definitely.
Even if your favorite artists are just doing the covers, it still pulls at that thing that you love about comics the most. So I think on one hand, it's a shame that these amazing artists aren't drawing the insides right now. But the reason is because they went to the covers, and that just the great artists doing the covers created an entire marketplace of speculator variant covers, because people kind of like forgot that they loved the art at least probably more than I would say than the writing. But what we really need to do, I think, at this point, is we need to get those artists back at the insides of the book, because I think part of the reason why comics have slipped a little bit off the radar, have faded a little bit, is because those amazing artists are not drawing the stories right now. And people can pretend like, oh, it's because of video games, oh, it's because of the movies, oh, it's because of this or that. But I guarantee you, if you have the greatest artists in comics drawing the insides of the pages, if they're drawing the stories themselves, then those stories will become, I think, as important or more important than they ever were in any time in comics. So as someone who draws covers, I want to lead a movement to bring the cover artists back to the insides of books. Having said that, when I was drawing my own comic books, at a certain point, I was like, to my editor Tom, I was like, what if I did variant covers for my own book? He was like, do it. And I'm actually speaking out of both sides of my mouth. I'm actually drawing variants for my own covers and the normal covers while I'm trying to draw the artist
the interiors.
back
pretty decent paycheck too at that point too. So I mean, that's, kudos for you for all that work, man. It's true, because I mean, Gabriel Delgado, he's one of my favorite artists, and seeing his covers, if I'm buying that series or not, if I see one of his covers, I'm just like, how can I pass this over? It's gorgeous. It's like amazing artwork, and it's turned into, comic book artists are really our modern kind of like art gods at this point. When I talk about people about art, and especially art students who are studying contemporary artists, romantic periods and stuff like that, and it's like comic book artists really have become, they're that good. Like, I honestly, it's you guys are better than and this is probably totally objective thing, but better than most artists that are put in museums and whatnot right now. What the effort and the design and the skill that I see that goes into it is extraordinary, and the speed, dude. For you to write, draw, pencil, ink, and color, and do variants, like that speed you have must be insane. Like, or you just don't sleep.
My editors may not agree with you about the speed, And I will not put myself up as one of the greatest artists, but I will say that as someone who loves art and as an artist myself, like always as an artist, the hardest art you can do is the human body, because we all know it so well. That's why all the masters in history have focused on the human body as the greatest forms of art, representational art. Now, when I went to art school, all my teachers had grown up in the 60s, and they were all non-representational art, meaning that they were focused on drawing cubes or putting cheese on a plate and calling it art, or like all this kind of like, iterating outwards, like kind of fighting the classic idea of art. And I think socially there was a movement that was at least in the art world, that was a anti-representational art, like, because it's hard to draw people. And if you're an artist and you can't draw a person, well, you can still play in the conceptual realm of art making. So you can still make a mud sculpture, put it in a museum as a big FU to all the people who are focused so much on drawing anatomy, and being like, look, I can beat you at your own game. And then it's like, and then it creates generations of people who are like, oh, that's a trick. What other tricks can I do to like play in this art world, this conceptual space? But there's still a yearning and a love for figure work, figure art. And it just kind of poured it over to comic books. It's not a mistake that comic books are like usually feature like men and women peak physicality, like Statue of David type proportions, you know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think it's funny. I think it's funny as an artist when I see superhero art iterating away from perfect proportions. I think it's interesting that maybe some artists are choosing to iterate away from that. But I think it just, again, for me, opens the field up for like touchdowns. It's just, for me, like every misstep from a modern comic book artist or comic book writer or comic book creator, not even misstep, it's like every iteration outwards from just core archetype is like, man, that's what I'm into right now. It's just like straight down the pipe, just like that, straight down the field, running as fast as I can before anyone else realizes that hole's there. And just like archetypal characters, like statuesque bodies, men, women, barbarians, orcs, superheroes, superpowers, cosmic stories, good, evil. Like, I want to do that right now because it's just a space that's it's just open. And I just feel it's like, whoa, what, this is such a, what it's like I feel like it's a trick. Like no one's looking. Like it's just like there's a Ferrari in my driveway and the keys are there and there's the license plate have my name on it, and it's just like, okay, I'm in.
Dude, that's awesome. It's true, and that was the biggest thing that caught my attention, was that Friendzetta mixed with a superhero vibe, and you're just like, how is this not a thing? Like, why isn't this like already blown up? Like, why hasn't this happened before? And it's hard to find something unique in comics in that sense too, like finding the right combination and spinning the wheel to be like, what can I mix up here to that really hasn't been touched, like in over 80 years of like comic book history. What can still be fresh, what can still feel new? And especially with Marvel, I mean, Marvel pushes out so much work. What drew you to Marvel comics over DC, or is there like not really a preference, it just happens to be who hired you?
Well, when I was a kid, I was more of a Marvel kid, just in general. I mean, I always loved Batman for sure, and I had a lot of Superman toys and a lot of Superman sleeping bags and pajamas and etc. But the stories I read were mostly Marvel, and I don't know why. No real reason at the time, but I just kind of grew up with those characters, and the one I related to most was always Spider-Man. That kind of like, I just related to him, like that character that tries real hard, sometimes gets selfish, sometimes hurts people. That's his whole origin story, right? Gets a little big in the britches, gets a little cocky, forgets about what he's supposed to do, hurts someone he loves, is reminded that there are costs, and then returns and grows and keeps trying. And the whole time he's trying, he's like, can't pay rent, and his aunt's dying, and he's got girl problems, but he keeps trying and he keeps falling on his face and he keeps getting back up and he keeps trying. And like for me, I feel like that dude taught me how to face life, like that kid taught me how to live. So I've always liked that stuff a lot. And I always find that Marvel's been doing comics for so long, and so DC even longer. Mm-hmm. And I always feel like it's always cycles. So you'll always find at some point there is a return to archetype. And just right now, I'm probably one of the first into it, but I think everyone will follow. I think because here's what I say, right? If your life is failing, right? You're not doing well, something's wrong. What's the reason? It's probably you've drifted away from who you are, right? That's usually the answer. You're out with the wrong people. Maybe you're drinking too much. Maybe you're just not focused. Maybe you're in the wrong job. And it's always like, what's the fix? It's like, just return to who you are. Like, go back to your core, to who you should be. And I think that's just how it works. So I'm trying to do that with comics. Like with Amazing Fantasy specifically, I have a real urge to like just go to the core of who these characters are. Like your first image you have of Captain America, boom, that's what I want to do. The first image you have of Spider-Man, boom, that's what I want to do. And again, there's such an opening right now. So it's like, it feels like a trick, but I'm taking that run.
Well, it's true because we've, like we were saying, these characters have evolved so much, they're almost unrecognizable. You know what I mean? Like, I was trying to pick up recent Spidey books, and you're right. Like, I think of, high school Spidey to like slightly post high school, like college Spidey.
Yeah,
and
sure.
now
25-year-old Spider-Man, maybe.
You know what I mean? Yeah, he's not doing anything crazy. And then I look at some of the books now that I try to catch up on, and I'm just like, I have no idea what's going on. Like, I can't even I couldn't even pick up where he is in his life. And I mean, if I wasn't consistent with like, I guess like Tom King's run on Batman, I'm sure I'd be lost just trying to pick that up. But you have to like kind of just take it back to the center and be like, okay, if we're going to reboot this, how are we, or, continue a new writer, a new artist, how are we going to, capture the old audience with the new audience and still keep their core, their essence?
Yeah. It's like find your center, like in the Buddhist, the pure sense of the
using Spider-Man as an example. I remember my friend watched a Dan Slott interview, and this was after he had finished his like issue, I think 800. I think that's what he went up to at some point. Yeah. But, Dan Slott put it, the way he looked at it was like putting his toys back into the toy chest. He's like played with them, and now he's going to kind of like dismantle them and put them back to where they used to be. And that example being like a little bit of a spoiler, but it's been a couple of years at this point. Like Spider-Man was a big CEO but by the end of that series, he was broke. He was like barely able to like live in like a friend's apartment. He lost everything, and he didn't have the crazy tech. He just had the spider suit, and he kind of was just what he was when he first started. And yeah, it's one of those things, like you bring them back to their core.
Yeah. Well, even Frank Miller's Dark Knight, like that was him returning to his core, that Dark Avenger, like, he had given it all up, and then he kind of reemerged as like the Batman, like I love those. I love those stories because I think there's a lot of like. Here's a weird thing: is again, we're not talking about religion or politics, but every religion in the world is a narrative-based system. Yeah, right. It's like a system of stories and storytelling, and so we have this inbuilt need to learn from stories, not just like as like a fun way to pass the time, but like I said, Spider-Man taught me how to live, like as a way to learn how to address the world.
Yeah, it's survival information. That's essentially what stories are, is just teaching you things. And that's why, I mean, like what the first story ever is like the story of Gilgamesh, and you look at that now and it still makes sense. It's still applicable.
Yeah,
you know
right.
what I mean?
And if you had ancient knowledge, that you'd want to pass thousands of years from now, well, you may want to wrap it up in a story.
Yeah, exactly. And it's how we all communicate on a day-to-day too. You can't, if you're going to tell someone something, you're going to lead up to it, get to a point, and then it better have a good ending, because if you're leading up and you don't have a good ending, then you're gonna be like, what happened? Like, what was the result? Why did they leave?
Here's worse than that. No one will remember your story. Like if you don't hit the landing, no one's gonna remember it at all.
That's especially true like in film, and you could have a bitchin' 2.5 hours, but if you don't stick those last 15 minutes, no one's gonna care about those bitchin' 2.5 hours.
They can also people get mad. Like people get angry. Oh, I invested two hours and then you did that at the end.
I spent $40 on tickets and spent another $60 on food for this.
Yeah, like it's an emotional reaction to
totally
witness an ending that doesn't work. Like you feel just cheated and robbed, and it's like, well, why would that be, unless there was some like life mechanism why the ending has to make sense to you?
Yeah,
like that's the meaning, right? Like what it just is. I find it so interesting. So I don't really think about it too much, but I do like to think about weird ideas. Like
I was gonna ask actually a little off topic, I guess. Sorry to like stray too far. I was looking at your IMDb. A quick question. It says Kaare rhymes with Atari. Was that them or you that added that?
That was me.
Okay.
Me. Yeah.
That actually makes sense. I was like, oh yeah, it does rhyme. I didn't think of that. But it does say on your IMDb that you are is the only writer director in the world working simultaneously in comics, film, and TV. And then it talks about being the first recipient of Canada's award for the Schuster, and your Spider-Man book was in the top 25 Spider-Man stories of all time. Now, talking about working, investing into film, that's why I kind of wanted to bring that up. So you're writing, drawing, coloring, doing variants for comics. You're writing, producing, directing some shows and movies, and then, also, I imagine if you're getting awards, you're traveling a bit and doing cons. Well, at least not right now, but at the time we're doing cons and signings and meet and greets and all that. How do you fit it all? Like, like I'm just like. Does the week go, okay, today's Sunday, I'm going to write my movie. Tomorrow's Monday, I'm going to go film it. Tuesday, I'm going to write the comic script. And then Wednesday, I'm going to go draw that. Thursday, I'm going to color it. And then my week's done. Talking about making sure you land these endings with your stories, for instance, and having so much on your plate. Like, is there some sort of pressure, I imagine? And also, like, how do you manage to, I guess, work on all this? Or is it kind of just whatever the flavor of the week is?
Well, here's what so I've always had lots of interest. Like when I was a kid, I didn't see any difference between movies and comics and animation or video games or toys, or they were just all like the one thing that I loved. And then the world was like, oh no, these are different things. You can only do one. And then I broke into comic books, and then I just didn't believe the world anymore. So I just bought a bunch of film gear and started making shorts for myself.
Hell yeah!
Kind of built up a separate career in comics and then directing. So those are two separate careers that I've built up. But the trick is there's a couple tricks. One is that you can develop movies and you can develop stuff while you're doing comic books, no problem. Mm-hmm. But as soon as you go into pre-production, you have to hard stop comics for like the length of pre-production and production and post. So that's not long. Like in a film, the movies I've done are just small movies, a few million dollars, like under $5. Mm-hmm. So, prep is usually 2 weeks and shooting is like 4 weeks. And then post is longer, but, I don't think I've ever gone more than at the most 6 months away from comics. And that was a long time. Maybe not even that long, but what I found, so there's that one trick is that you can develop movies part-time, no matter what your job is. Mm-hmm. And in today's world, when you're directing films specifically, you need another source of income. Like I know a lot of friends who kind of like fell into economic chaos because you direct a couple movies, you get paid well, and then you hit a dry spot. And if all you're doing is directing movies right in today's world right now, you're going to run into some problems. So for me, comic books has always been a way to just keep income coming all the time. But also I would never not do comic books because there's this idea I had as a kid, like what a director did was a director made the props, a director held the camera, a director recorded the sound, a director built the set, a director like, made the monster makeup, I would learn all those things. I learned monster makeup. That's the idea I had as a kid. Like, the director does everything basically. And I want to be the guy that does everything. And then when you start directing, you're like, oh no, there's like teams of people that do that stuff for you. And you can kind of try to control the process, but the only real job that does what I thought a director did as a kid is comic books. Like when you write and draw comic books, I am designing every prop, designing every background. I'm doing all the acting. I'm doing all the camera work. I'm doing all the lighting. I'm doing like comic books is actually what I used to think directing would be as a kid. So for me, it's so awesome just to like be able to do all that stuff. But it's lonely. You're in your basement. You're in your studio. I'm in my basement right now. And so when you're directing, like you work with 100 people every day. So it's like you're social. It's like collaborative. It's like you're pushing each other up the mountain. But the trick I found to multitasking is this: like, what is the most important thing? I make a list of what I want to get done in a day, and then the most important thing I always do first, because then if I run out of time, at least I've done the most important thing in the day first. And sometimes, depending where I am, sometimes it's a comic book, sometimes it's a cover, sometimes it's a film project, but it's usually on a daily grind. It's usually like right now, it's Amazing Fantasy. I always try to do that first in the day. The rest of the day, I'll fill up with whatever, meetings or other work or writing or whatever. But the trick I find for multitasking is always prioritize your day and do the most important thing first. That's kind of the shortcut to having to juggle a schedule. But I try to, I like stress. I like to be overwhelmed. I like to be like panicked about deadlines, and I like to fight against things, and
it gives you that sense of like, all right, time to get work done,
that gives you energy in itself, like
not just energy. I think there's this idea of flow, like flow state, and flow state, like a rock climber, right? This idea that to get into real flow state, you need risk of failure, and the stakes need to be real high, and like you can't get into flow state just gardening. Like you have to be facing. So if you're like an elite athlete, like a motorbike daredevil or whatever, like it's only in that risk of extreme danger that you can kind of activate this weird flow state and do your best work. So for an artist, that's often your deadlines, because your deadlines are called deadlines because you will have a career death if you fail to meet them. So
that makes sense. Yeah,
those deadlines come quick. They come quick, and often it gets very addictive. That adrenaline surge of just trying to meet the deadlines is actually, I think, can create some of your best work. Even Frazetta would say a lot of his paintings came him painting all night. Over one night, a lot of his Conan covers were just one night of furious painting into the wee hours, just to make the deadline, and he'd ship off his boards still wet because they're done oil paint, and like I don't know. Sometimes I think that stress is needed to do good work.
Oh yeah, totally understand that.
That makes sense. Yeah,
often with projects from school to just like personal projects. That's just
right. Like school. Yeah, when you write that essay and it's like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? And then you just get it done, and you kind of, the world goes quiet, and you just focus, and you just like get it done. When I was in school, that was like probably always my best work.
That was literally my last 2 years of life. Every class was a month long for 2.5 years. And just producing a script or writing and collaborating and doing all that was just like, I have to do this today on top of a full-time job. Like, fuck.
Oh, yeah. I recently applied. I took a test to like become a teacher, and I totally did not do the essays part of the test where you have to write 2 essays like on the spot. And I had like 15 minutes to go. And I have never typed so fast and so precise in my life and wrote the most hardcore argument for an essay in those 15 minutes.
Yeah. No, that urgency can really focus you like a laser. Like it's a little, you have to be careful because it's a bit addictive to have that adrenaline surge. So
you are literally like pumping blood like crazy. Your heart is thumping and you're smashing those keys.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. No, that's what you need that urgency, man. Totally. Yeah. It's like you're in a battle for your life, like that's.
Oh yeah. Because if you miss it, that's it. Right. Yeah. Like homework assignment or deadline for a project, whatever it is. It's just like, you got to get this done, because if you're not getting it done, then it's going to be bad news.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
And nothing's scarier than failing a class in college or like ruining your career over something like that.
Yeah.
Just because you're too lazy one night, you know what I mean? Just like you gotta just push through. So when it comes to your directing, what like were some of your influences to really get you to want to do this? And like, who do you you talk about stealing? Who do you steal from when it comes to your directing and your writing with films?
Well, so when I steal, it's not necessarily like I steal from everyone, but it's often not. It's not so specific. Like, oh, I stole this shot from this person, or I stole the way this person draws eyes. It's not so intentional. It's just it's very non-intentional. So it's more what it really means is more you're not limiting yourself. So you're not trying not to do something because someone else
did it, or
because what you'll find is like you'll love something so much, you're like, oh, I love what that person did so much, I have to stop myself from doing that because that would just be me copying the thing I loved. And all that means is you're walling yourself off from everything you love, so it's not really like stealing. It's not really the good way to do it. It's not really like I'm taking this part from this person specifically. It's more just like, what are all the things that I love and want to do now? And then just do it. And sometimes you might want to break down, like there's a scare scene in The Eye from the Payne brothers from the South Korean horror movie that I just randomly really loved. And I really analyzed the shots and the length of the shots and the rhythm of how they did that. But that would be rare for me to do that. But it's more like a holistic, like it's more just not walling myself off from the things that I actually love, which is again, when you just are borrowing from people, you tend to get stuck with mediocrity because you're trying too hard not to be influenced.
Oh, I see what you mean there. No, that totally makes sense.
If that makes sense, it's a bit of a 100%. Weird.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's like I'm a musician, so it's like when you play music, you kind of I learn different bass lines, and so when I learn a certain trick by a certain bassist, it's like, well, I'm gonna use this like thumb technique
when writing your own.
Exactly. So just doing stuff like that. That's honestly probably music is probably the one thing I haven't seen you.
I'm not musical at all. Like I can't sing. I can't. I don't have no. And my parents are like do that sort of thing. They're
Do you ever watch like a superhero movie or like a Spider-Man film? You're like, I could have done that.
Yeah, well, here's the weird thing. So my directing career is actually much younger than my comic career. So like I feel like in my directing career, I haven't really had an opportunity to really flex yet. Like in comic books, I can kind of like Amazing Fantasy is me trying to flex. Like that's me being like that cover you pulled up was me. That was me directly stealing kind of a Sienkiewicz style from the 80s.
I can see that.
And doing it as a variant era cover because each variant cover, right? And there's the normal kind of Frazetta-esque cover. So each variant cover of Amazing Fantasy is kind of like an era cover. It's like it's just like what my influences were.
That's cool.
So in comic books, I can really kind of like flex. I have I can work with the best characters, the best companies, and I have all my gear, all my equipment. The directing career is like still pretty young. So, I haven't done a film more than like, I don't know, $4 million. Like, and in the TV space, I haven't, I've done some Netflix, I've done some sci-fi, but I haven't done like a network show like CBS or whatever. So it's like, I feel like there's still I still feel like there's a lot of room for me to just prove myself in that field. And I'm right now I'm working on this film. I can't talk about it, but we're just looking at budgets, and I'm doing some art for it, and the script is good.
Nice.
Like that would be a film where I could really flex. So it's just I'm just not there yet in the directing space where I can be like, oh, that's me. Like,
Do you have like a superhero film you want to make, or is there some sort of like? You look at, I don't know, the shared universe of with the MCU, and you go, I got the perfect plan to like make a standalone film, or I got a film that could fit within this, and when I get the opportunity, I want to do this.
Well, I think there's a Spider-Man Rain movie that could be made. Not now, because the mainstream consciousness still is like, Spider-Man teenage high school kid, and the Marvel universe is expanding, but it's not expanding that crazy, and it's such a crazy story. Yeah. But I feel like just like comic books, you're going to hit this point where the Marvel movie viewer is going to be a little tired, a little over the standard, a little over the normal, and maybe 10 years from now, there'll be an opening in the football field for a Spider-Man movie, and that would be a time to do it.
To see that to see that Doc Ock scene on the screen.
Oh,
man,
dude, that'd be wild. Imagine that, like within a 30-year span, you write and draw this book, and then you make the movie.
I think that'd be pretty fun. I think that'd be
awesome. Screw it. Yeah, let you voice act in it too, or make a cameo.
Yeah, do the dead Doc Ock. That'd be perfect, dude.
No one would even see it coming.
Yeah, no. Let me tell you, the entertainment space is really weird because it's changing so quickly. Like what's happening with movies right now and streamers right now and Netflix right now and all those things. Like that space is changing so rapidly all the time. It's I don't know what it's going to be like 10 years from now.
Who knows? Yeah, with the way technology coincides with entertainment, like we had no idea what to expect, like where things are going to go, and with how big everything's getting, right? Like,
and how open and accessible it is now. Like I'm working on a film project right now, and it's really like a zero budget where we're buying equipment from one place and then returning it before the deadline hits and using our phones to record everything. You know what I mean? Like that's how you got to run it, and it's gonna continue to evolve to where that's even more accessible. Well,
just look at the Unreal stuff, the virtual production stuff for the video game. Stuff.
That's a whole nother beast.
Yeah, like it's all there. I think I heard that there are more movies being made now every year than ever before.
Yeah,
but there are less venues to even show the movies, let alone make any money from them. So it's films in a weird space where because it's so accessible and because it's been such a focus of culture for the past 40 years since the blockbuster days of the 80s. 40 years of just like intense cultural focus, right? Like all the torrenting sites were based off of stealing pirated movies. All the technology in your iPhone is basically built around making movies. Like even the new iPhone was like, oh, we've got the new cameras for professional filmmakers. It's like it's so weird how culturally we've been focused on film. And even all the conspiracy theorists, they're always doing like film analysis, trying to prove one thing or the other by reverse engineering, like The Shining or whatever. Like, it's such a film focused culture right now. It'd be interesting to see what happens 10 years from now. I don't know.
It's I used to work at Apple for a bit, and that was a big focus, was just like show everyone how easy it is to record and use the camera and all that. And they even had like an Apple Film Festival where I made my first short, and it was just like that was like a employee type of thing. It wasn't even just like a contest or anything. It was just like for all the employees to do it and getting you to make that. It's really cool. But it's also like one of those things where it's becoming oversaturated in a sense where you got to find the good and the bad and the amateur from like who can't do it, and it's a tug and pull type of thing, and it's going to be crazy to see if it continues or if it just stops. Like it's like radio dramas are coming back with Audible. Sandman has a radio drama, volume 2 coming out. And is film going to do that same thing? Like just stop at some point and then make a giant comeback years later? I'm kind of curious to see that trend, to see how things will kind of maneuver.
See, the one thing that film does that nothing else does is it's a shared communal physical space with people. Whereas like a play, like an in-person play, whereas everything else like streaming, whether on your phone or your computer or your TV or a podcast, it's such an individual. Video games, it's just such an individual, isolating experience. There's no share. Like there's nothing better than being in a shared movie theater, watching an amazing movie with a group with hundreds of strangers. Like there's something, I don't know. There's something that's it's ritualistic about that all.
Yeah, and it almost doesn't matter sometimes if the movie's that good. I saw the re-release of Phantom Menace, and I swear to you, that was like the most fun experience watching a Star Wars movie in theaters because everyone went in knowing how terrible it was. Everybody's cheering Jar Jar Binks when he's on screen, you know, like it's well, a weird experience.
Here's a funny thing. Remember, like speaking of film, this I always find this such a strange story. George Lucas creates the most influential movie of all time, Star Wars. Basically, he stole Flash Gordon, but because he stole it, he made it his own thing, which is the true act of stealing, right? You steal something only to give yourself permission to make something else. And he does that, becomes amazing. Empire Strikes Back, he didn't even direct it. He just produced it. Same with Return of the Jedi, just produces it. Because now he's running his empire, does these 3 cultural touchstones, changes the face of movie making, and then he comes back, right, years later. And then the fan base that has grown, because that fan base didn't exist back then, that kind of fanboy empire stuff.
Yeah. They
turn against him, start trying to tear him down, make movies, right? The people against George Lucas. I don't remember that. Culturally, the fandom tries to destroy George Lucas, the man who gave them the thing they love. And just like people turning against their own father or something, they just want to rip him down and destroy him and take the thing that they love themselves. And what do we get stuck with? These new movies. I don't know if I can swear in this.
No, go for it.
Yeah, go for it, man. Yeah.
Fucking movies that are so fucking terrible. That's what happens. And what happens? Oh, why don't we? Oh, the secretary of George Lucas, and now she's going to give these 3 new amazing filmmakers their own movies to make, and then she's going to fire them all, hire new people, and try to find out what the people want, and try to give the people what they want. And it's like, well, in that whole process, the one element you've left out was the one motherfucking guy who gave you the 3 things you loved. And even though the prequels are considered kind of like a bit terrible, it still had that same guy in there. And the 3 movies that happened later, these new movies, the only element that none of the other movies had was that one guy. And you really start to see this weird thing where it's like he was the essential essence of that whole thing. And even though those 3 prequels, we make fun of them, and you still love seeing them in person.
Oh yeah,
but these new movies, it's like you gave people what they thought they wanted, and it's like they didn't really want that.
Yeah.
They just wanted those old movies again, and they were gone. It's like trying to hook up with your old high school girlfriend again. It's like that period in your life was so amazing, you can never go back. If you met her now, she'd be in her 30s or whatever, and it would be awkward, and she'd have kids, and it would be like, it's like you just gotta, stay in the now, return to center, stay in your core,
return to center. Yeah, there you
and
go.
If you hire someone else to kind of like scour the world to find a girl that reminded you of the girl you had a romance with in high school, you're gonna end up with these empty fucking movies that just create this emotional reaction, right? This emotional reaction of just hate. Like, I hate these new movies, and I don't know why, but I do know why. It's because George Lucas had nothing to do with them. And even if George Lucas had made 3 terrible new movies, I would still have something to love, because at the end of the day, what you love about art is somehow the essence of the artist inside it. And when you take away the artist, the essence of the one guy, it's just so empty. It's just an empty experience. The void, the black hole.
Well, the thing with art is that it's supposed to invoke an emotion, right? Or at least that's what the definition I've heard, and that kind of makes sense to me, is that it invokes emotion. And typically that's because the artist that creates it, they put a piece of themselves in it, right? And that allows that emotion to be distributed to, the audience or the onlookers, however you want to put it.
I used to think that too, that the purpose of art was to generate a response. Either emotional or whatever, but like have a guy show up in your house and murder your mom. Like, there's an emotional response. I wouldn't call him an artist. What now I look at art in a bit more of probably a return to core, a return to center. And here, I think art does 2 things. I think it has to be new. There's something about it has to be fresh. You have to feel that it's new. right? What's the worst thing you can call an artist? A hack. Oh, they're just redoing what they did before. And not just that, like if you love a song, it goes a certain way and it's new. You're like, oh my God, I got to tell my friends about the song. And then there's a different musician and they come up with a song that sounds very similar to that song, but is not that song. You will not respond the same way. You won't love that song as much as you love that first time you heard that new cool song. So it has to be new. And it has to point towards a shared truth. What that means is it has to have embedded actual meaning in the art itself. So Star Wars is an archetypal tale of a boy becoming a man, becoming a savior of the galaxy, whatever that is, right? He's like, there's some kind of truth there. It's like a kind of a religious, almost archetypal religious tale, something about it. And so the two things I think it needs is it needs novelty, it needs to be brand new, and it needs to be true. And if we go back to that, every religious system is a narrative system. We're telling stories to learn how to live. Well, that makes sense because we're always trying to figure out the world. And if art can show us a new way to go towards some shared truth, that's like a step culturally, like, oh, let's go this way. And then there'll be another new way towards a shared truth. Oh, let's go this way. And each time we're going towards this shared truth. And empty art has no truth. It's trying to replicate truth, it's trying to mimic truth. And it's trying to mimic novelty by just doing something that someone else did. And so it's inherently disgusting because it's pointing us societally towards hell. Not like a religious version of hell, but like the Antichrist version of, again, I'm not religious. I'm Canadian. In Canada, we don't even have religion. But when you start talking about concepts, they instantly sound religious because it's like it's shared truth, a new way to journey towards shared truth. To me, those are the two things that art has to have. And just an emotional response is kind of like poking a baby. Like it's like it kind of feels like art, but it won't last. Like you need those two things in to last.
That's very true. Brian McDonald, he does a podcast called You Are a Storyteller and whatnot. He wrote a book called The Golden Theme, and that's basically what it's all about. And, he's someone who did stuff for like Pixar. And when you look at Pixar movies and everything and the way they format stuff, it's just like, okay, it does make sense. Like their message and their format and their formula and how they're always just trying to push that storytelling medium is trying to get closer and closer, not only to an emotional response, but something that you could relate to so much. It's universal at that point. And finding that universal truth is like that golden kind of theme in that sense of you're going to connect with people, and that connection is what's going to make it flourish at that point.
What's the last great Pixar movie you saw?
Soul?
Let me see. I'd have to look at like a list because I've watched, I'm trying to think of, honestly, Toy Story 4.
Toy Story 4. I would say Pixar is pretty good, but I find the problem that I have with Pixar movies in general is that Soul was pretty cool because there's some new things there. But often Pixar, because they write with committees, I feel the committee in the room. Like I don't feel a voice per se.
Oh, I could see that.
In the same way that I feel even Star Wars. Like even though George Lucas was ripping off Flash Gordon, ripping off Joseph Campbell, like I feel there was a singular voice, and I think for some reason art needs to come from a single place. So these committees, I don't know, I feel Pixar often replicates patterns, but it's been a while since they've really made a breakthrough film in the way that they used. For a while, every film they made was a home run. Like every film they made was like, oh my God, this is, I don't know. But they still do high quality work. I just feel like a bit often I feel the committee a little too much sometimes in those movies, if I'm just speaking critically.
No, yeah, I could totally, and especially for somebody who does it all, you know what I mean? You can really analyze and see like your decisions versus a room full of people making a decision. You know what I mean? And I could see how a writer's room can definitely differentiate from, you know, those multiple voices, multiple ideas where things kind of stray and tug and pull versus the singular vision where you're just like, you know, your start and end point, and it is coming straight out of you, not just like, well, I felt that and you felt that too and they felt that, okay, let's do that and put that in there, and instead of just the one guy being like, hey man, what about this idea?
Yeah. Or in Pixar it's like, well, all of our movies end in a chase. Where's the chase to end the movie?
Yeah,
Every
there you go.
That's the formula. It just feels like, you know, it's like, even though it kind of works, it kind of feels like it starts to feel real again, because it's lacking the novelty. It feels like a retread. It feels like a kind of I've been growing to this idea lately, is like that the flaws in your work are the mistakes you make in your work are actually the thing that's important in your work. Like supermodels always have one little messed up thing in their face, you know? It's like that thing that's wrong.
Yeah.
And because it's wrong, it's like they're not just a model anymore, they're a supermodel. It's like they make you lean in. So those mistakes you make, like I've really, and you may feel this in Amazing Fantasy, because it's not perfect. There are, it's not a perfect piece of work. Like, but I really am embracing right now. Maybe this is just a defense mechanism for not being as good as I wish I was. But I really feel like the flaw in the flaw in you, maybe that's your soul. Again, I keep bringing these. I'm not religious. I'm just Canadian, but maybe the flaw in you is the thing that makes you real. And if you were just perfect, you wouldn't even be a person. If you were just a perfect person, who would even care about you?
It's a robot at that point, and like,
yeah,
it's not even like, even that has a flaw to a certain extent. You know what I mean? So defining that's even difficult.
Yeah, totally. Like there's something about working against your flaw is somehow the meaning of your work. You know?
Makes sense. Yeah, no, for sure.
Like if you try to like wipe out all your flaws, you'll just end up gray.
Yes.
Right? Like, oh, it's too red. Oh, it's too blue. Oh, it's too yellow. Oh, what's not too red and not too yellow, not too black and not too white and not too green. It's gray. It's like, you know, it's like what's I don't know. There's something I'm drawn to this more and more right now, where it's like the flaw is the point of it all. Like if we're all living in the simulation, if we're all living in the Matrix, that little piece of code that's not supposed to be there is the soul of the Matrix. You know, like I'm into this idea right now that the flaw is the point of it all.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Maybe.
I mean, when you talk about characters and creating a character, the first thing I look for is like, well, what's the flaw of this character? Because that's what I'm going to build off of. That's what I'm going to focus on, and that's where, you know, the center of this character is their flaw. And if you don't, you know, zone into that flaw and explore that flaw, then it's not going to be anything. You know, you got to really define that one aspect, because that's what's going to grab attention. That's what's going to create that character and give that character personality.
Or even the greatest musicians are usually they're kind of crappy singers, or the kind of crappy guitar players, or what's something about them that's kind of like shouldn't work.
Oh, Hendrix, for example. I mean, that's just like commonly. He's not the greatest. Yeah, he's a phenomenal player, but he's not the cleanest guitar player. You know what I mean? He's not.
Or you could look at like drummers like Keith Moon. You know, like that man was all over the place, but he still stood out.
So I guess the point I'm trying to make here is like you, if you're a creator, you are a flawed person, and that is the point of it. Like it's just like, what is your flaw? Like fight it, find out what that is, but just don't hide it. Like even comic books, right? Like I think Rob Liefeld is a name we'll remember forever in comic books, right?
Yeah. That name will always come up.
Right. And he gets made fun of because of his shoulder pads and his feet that are missing, but like those flaws somehow make him him. Yeah. And like there's something about Jack Kirby, like
I was just gonna say,
in comics, like when I was a kid, I thought his stuff was actually kind of ugly, and then you kind of age into it, like a bourbon or something. It's like you really be like, oh yeah, like that. The flaw is the point of Jack Kirby. Like those flaws
100%.
are the point.
Yeah, that's what drew me to Kirby. When I first, looked at the Fourth World, and I had the first little mini omnibus of it, I was like, this is interesting for sure. But 5 years later, I looked at it, I was like, this is fucking brilliant. Like compared to anything else coming out at this time, and these ideas and this structure and these lines, the way he's pulling stuff off is insane, And with writers as well, you see that all over the place. Alan Moore is like another person that you could definitely see the flaws in the direction of his stuff, but he's known for some of that stuff now, and you kind of have to just own it. And the more you own it and kind of just take care of it, it's gonna flourish and it's gonna really get out there.
It's like the signature of your work will be your flaws will become the signature of your work, I think.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And so my work has a lot of signatures. Full of signatures.
What would you say one of your flaws is?
Oh my god!
Yeah.
Oh my just. Come on.
He's
yeah. You can't even ask a creator that because you're just like, it all sucks, man. I don't even know what you're.
Well, let me tell you, I think the people that are the hardest on themselves, like you can't, like all the say Olympic level athletes will be the hardest on themselves, and will always be a little bit crazy. But you need to be hard on yourself to get better. So, like, I don't think it's wrong. I don't think it's wrong to just hate yourself half the time and hate what you do half the time, as long as it's not all the time. Like, as long as
it's not like completely crippling you to stopping you from doing it. You have to take it on.
But near crippling is actually artistically a good place to be.
Yeah, it's like the optimal.
Yeah, when I was, I'll tell you, sir. When I was doing Spider-Man Rain. I don't know if I ever told him the story. When I was doing Spider-Man Rain, I did the colors for the first issue, and then it just was not. I was actually going to film school when I was drawing it.
Oh, cool!
Like a 5 month thing. It was like a kind of like Canada's version of the invite only film. Kind of like they take 8 directors for 5 months.
Oh yeah, exactly. I know what you're talking about. Those type of programs.
Yeah. So, but I was just like. So, I asked Jose Villarrubia to do the take over the colors, basically, and he saw how hard I was being on myself, and how I think I was just telling him. I can't remember what the conversation was, but I just remember the end of the conversation. He asked me if I had thought about taking medication to stabilize because I was so incredibly because all I could see was all the things I was doing wrong, and you spiral and you fight, and sometimes on the phone you just like vent, and I had vented to Jose, and we didn't know each other that well, but I think at that point he thought I was deranged. So
I remember playing shows as a kid and whatnot, and you make a mistake while you're playing, and then you're just like, fuck, everyone heard that, that's gonna stand out. Your guitarist takes a look at you and just like, what the fuck, man? And then you look at the crowd and you're like, they didn't notice anything. Like, only I knew I missed a note, only I knew I made a mistake or didn't pause. It's the audience isn't really gonna catch that. And you look at that book and it's practically flawless, dude. Like, did you do digital art for that book, or was that all pencil and ink and paper?
The backgrounds were digital. I was experimenting with digital backgrounds, but the characters were actually drawn on paper.
Oh, we were talking about that on that show. We were like, how the hell did he draw this?
Yeah. Certain aspects, you're just like, that's definitely digital. I could tell. And the backgrounds, that makes sense. And then
the backgrounds were like, that's some old school 3D artwork. I was originally going to do the whole book 3D, but I didn't know how to do it. But I was just like, I'm going to do a 3D book. And I just could not ramp up my skills fast enough to be able to do it. But nowadays I draw my interiors digitally, and the covers often are painted on paper, but sometimes like the Amazing Fantasy covers are painted on the computer, but I do a lot of painting on paper for the covers
What did you do for the Joker? I just picked up your Joker #5 cover that came out last week or so.
Oh yeah, that's paper.
Oh, cool.
Dude, so when I first broke in, like no one was doing digital paintings on covers, or like one or two guys. So I was like one of the only ones that did digital on covers, and it was fun, and I could do things people couldn't do. But now almost everyone does digital covers. So the way to stand out is, or the way to, whatever, every artist wants to subvert things, right? Wants to do at least me, I feel a strong inclination to zig while the world is zagging. So now that everyone does digital covers, I look for, I bought an airbrush and a compressor and pencil crayons and paints and
back to center. That's the whole that's the theme of today's episode.
But also stealing from Juice Druzan, the famous poster artist.
Nice. Okay.
So
cool.
I, took a lot of techniques from him, and stealing.
It's extraordinary. You and I know Sean Gordon Murphy does a lot of stuff just all by hand, and he doesn't do too much digital, and it's cool seeing that layout because it is really rare now. And you look at comics, independent, mainstream, so much of it's digital, and you can tell. And it's cool, it's brilliant, you know what I mean? But sometimes seeing that original art is what gets me really excited when I go to cons and seeing those pages out there and whatnot, or those covers, and that's the cool stuff. And
I think that battle of fighting the page, really the battle of making art in the good art gets embedded in the art itself. Something about where you can see the struggle, even if it looks effortless, you can see it in the art. And I think that when digital art goes bad, it's when that struggle gets hidden, that struggle gets taken away.
Layers.
Somehow those and even now when I do those Amazing Fantasy covers, I'm experimenting with including more of the preparatory drawing by hand on a tablet. I'm experimenting with having more of the drawing in the finished work and not trying to use it as a step to do something else. I'm trying to embed the process into the piece.
That makes sense. Yeah, nice. So when you do your interiors and writing at the same time, do you do a script, or do you do the panel layouts and then you start writing this? Do you do a Marvel method in that your own way in that sense, or are you kind of just full script and then I'm gonna go from there, or what's your process?
So just process wise, here's how I tackle books now is I'll do kind of a quick paragraph of what each issue will be. And then as I write, I break that paragraph into single sentences, and each single sentence is basically a page. So I will write with 20, the average book is 20 pages these days. So 20 single sentences. And then I'll kind of know what I can fit in an issue. And then I'll just start drawing. And I can, because I'm just doing it myself, I can deviate as much or as little as I want as I'm doing it. And as I'm drawing, I'm writing dialogue, suggestions, if they come up, because often they come up you really feel like you're acting when you're drawing. So I'll come up with words and stuff and I scribble them in the margins. And then after I draw the layouts, I'll go back and take all those scribbled words and I'll create a dialogue script. And then if I have time, I'll actually letter the layouts, because in the lettering of the layouts, you can really see the flaws and what fits in each panel and how it adjusts. And then I'll hand it off to my editors as that's the best way to do it. If you can give them a lettered layouts, and so it's basically it's like you're doing the same. They're like waves of an ocean. You're it's emerging as a whole. It's like a paragraph becomes a page of sentences, becomes layouts, becomes words, becomes a script, becomes lettered layouts. And it really it's a holistic way of making it. It's not so segmented. And then what I've also found though, is it's a neat little trick is and I found this from the first thing I gave Axel, if you give an editor lettered layouts, in their mind, it's already a completed work. So you get very few notes. If you give someone just a script, they're like, oh, well, what this page and that page, it's it's because everything's it's potential. It's it's not actuated. So if you give someone lettered layouts, it's a tip for all the writer artists out there. Do not hand in words before art. Lettered layouts, and then you'll get less notes.
Nice. That's so cool.
You've cracked the code.
That's the code.
Well, I mean, as we kind of wind this down and whatnot, we always have just like a bunch of random, like quick questions to ask people. I'm very interested if you're gonna take on a DC work. If you can talk about that, I don't know, like what a contract might entail. But if you could take on a DC work, what characters would you take on?
Yeah, well, I think I have a Batman tale in me that needs to happen at some point. No immediate plans, but like that's the one character at DC that like I've always loved as even as a child. So I definitely would like to do that at some point. I find him such an interesting character. Like here's what's interesting. Like the most popular character at DC is Batman, I think. And he's a character that is super patriarchal in a classic sense, not an ideological sense, but in a sense of like he is a steward of the city, like, and he protects the city through punishment. And like he's such a dark, like, rules, these are my rules, and I am the Batman, and I will enforce the rules of this city. And it's like, I find it so interesting that societally we're so drawn to that character. Maybe it's because it's missing in today's world. I don't know. Like maybe that's like it's like I don't know. There's something there that I find so interesting, and he's so dark and black, and like it's like a shadow. He's the shadow side of every good person. Like it's like an interesting kind of like, and artistically, he's just fun to draw. He's got the cape and the ears, and the shadows.
I heard drawing Batman is one of those things that's like you got to do so much armor and accessories and just like all the cape stuff, the way it moves, and just there's so much detail going on there.
Yeah, well, I would if I did Batman, I'd probably strip away all the armor.
Just keep the cloth.
I think the armor is. I think the armor has been. Again, if I just see an opening in the field.
Yeah,
I see a way to draw Batman right now, no armor. That would I think people would be like, whoa, like it would be a reminder of like, whoa, that's a way to do it. Like I haven't seen that,
that's my favorite kind. Yeah, that's my favorite kind is that Alex Ross, the animated series type of cloth, Musical.ly type of outfit, because it's like, man, that's kind of how I imagine Batman. You got to be swift and. Dude, I would love to see you draw a Spawn cover. Like that would be.
Spawn would be great. Spawn would be great. But here's the trick to Batman is there's been so many iterations of Batman. It's like again, what would that story be? But I think I even have one right now that would be pretty fun. I roll around ideas in my head, like as I'm working on one project, like I'm always rolling around 100 different ideas. It's like more the time in the day. Like if I could clone myself. It would probably end in a bloodbath, but the work we could get done.
Yeah,
the amount of drawing and writing.
Yeah.
My random questions, I guess I could ask. I guess I got a few small ones. If you could list us a top 3 favorite superheroes, top 3 non-major publisher, non-superhero, or I guess just independent characters, and then any. Like concrete advice for anyone like ourselves on like how to break into comics and just how to stay consistent in comics. I think that's a big one no one really talks about.
Like how to stay consistent in the amount of work you do or your style or
stay relevant. Like, you break in and then you start writing or drawing and then you kind of don't get another project or whatever it is. Like how do you continue your career from the first year, and then how do you stay relevant within the career, like within the 20th year, for instance?
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, my top 3 heroes are Spider-Man, Batman, and Spider-Man. Those are my top 3 heroes.
There you go.
That's mainstream. My top 3 non-mainstream heroes,
or characters, anybody. It could be any independent character.
I don't know, Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, there we go.
G.I. Joe. I really loved the Crow back in the day.
Fuck yeah, dude. James.
You just gotta do a crossover.
Yeah.
Damn, there you go. That's your new project. That's untapped territory.
And then the other question was how to stay consistent.
Well, how is it you found is the best way to break into comics, and then how is it you maintain a career? I guess is a better way to put it.
Yeah. So how to break into comics. So there's this idea that you have when you go to the shop And you either, if you're an artist, you look at some art. If you're a writer, you read a story, and you're like, this is crap. I could do that. Why can't I get in yet? I can do that. And I remember thinking that myself very vividly. And someone told me once, I think it was an in-person thing. I can't remember where I heard it from, but it made a lot of sense. It was like, well, if you think that's crap and you can do it, well, then there's probably a ton of other guys who could also do it. So you can't just be better than crap. Like, you actually have to be better than great. So how do you do that? Like, and I think you could say, like I think I'm doing with Amazing Fantasy, you can often look for a hole in the field. Like, what's the thing I can do that no one else can do right now? Like, maybe it's comedy, maybe it's humanity, maybe it's horror. I don't know what it is, but like, how can I do things that what's the thing that no one else can do that I can do? Like, that's what you need to focus on. That's what will get you noticed, not just get you a job. Because if you never want to compete with crap, you'll just be slightly better than crap.
Yeah.
You want to look at the best person you know at the thing you want to do. If you're a writer, I don't know who that is. Maybe it's Tom King, maybe it's Bendis, I don't know who it is. And be like, how can I beat them? Like, what can I do that they can't do? Like, what's the hole in their game? Like, I see them fail at this thing so much. How could I beat them today on a project doing this thing? Like, that's what you want to focus on, you know?
So kind of just like bettering their flaws and overcoming their flaws and doing that in that sense.
It's like UFC. It's like Ultimate Fighting Championship. It's like the progression in that game has been so great because there's so many different styles. There's every year, it seems there's a new way to do a thing that no one else is doing. Maybe like the one of the most recent things was the calf kicks. No one was doing calf kicks. Dude, and then people found out, like, oh, I can really defeat someone just by kicking their calves. And for a while, it was just grappling, right? No one knew. Oh my God, grappling! Like what's the thing you can do now that no one else can do? Like, that's what you need to focus on. And if you're an artist, it's the same thing. It's like take your favorite artist. I don't know who that is. Whoever's working now that's blowing you away, and you're like, well, what can I do that guy can't do? And really, that's your way in. Your way in is to like do the thing no one else is doing, and you got to figure that out. And it's like, it's really hard. And the other thing I would say about breaking in is be careful when you ask for advice, because people will do one of two things. They'll either tell you how they did a thing and you're not them, so it won't even make sense to you, your life. Or what's more common is they won't want to see you get hurt. So they will tell you advice that will limit you. They will tell you advice that will protect you, that will give you a safety net, that will not get you into trouble. Like, if you ask your parents, you know, like I'm in high school. What's your advice for going to this party? They'll be like, well, don't drink. Maybe don't go. Maybe don't go with these friends of yours. Maybe don't talk to that girl because she's trouble. Like, it's like forgetting all the mistakes knowing all the mistakes they made in high school that turned them into the people they are today. Like it's very hard for someone to give you advice, because if I give you advice right now and then you fail hard and you ruin your life, I'll feel culpable. So often people will give you advice like, slow down, do something else. But really, when I was trying to break in, there was like a group of people that I met all trying to break in. And, you know, I think I was the only one that got in. There's not a lot of jobs. It's real tough. There's less jobs than you would hope. All the people that were working 20 years ago are still working now. So it's like you have to beat them. You have to knock them off. Yeah. But there is a way. And if I'm going to give you effective advice to do it right now, and that is just to slam your head against the wall until it breaks down, and to find the one thing that you can do that no one else can do. So like find that thing and then slam your fucking head against the wall, and you may not make it. but you have to do it. Like
Yeah.
it's like that's the only way through.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, that's the only way through. Once you get in, my first job at Marvel was I did a half an issue of Gambit 13, and I was like, oh my God, I'm ready. I'm so ready. I've been ready for years. Here I am. Finally, I get to do it. And I want these pages. I'm going to spend all my time on these pages. And my girlfriend, she's trying to break up with me because I'm ignoring her. I'm going to fuck that girlfriend. And I'm just going to, you know, I was 20 or whatever I was. And I was just like, I'm just going to like, this is it. I have it. This is my chance. And then I did those pages. They showed up in the comic book store, and I was so embarrassed. Once I saw them printed on a page, I was so humiliated, publicly embarrassed at how poor they were. I was just like a wake up call to me, like, oh my God, I got to get better. Like, this is not going to be good enough. Like, I have failed. I thought I succeeded in the moment. I was making these pages, and I have failed. And it was just like, I just got to get better. I better get real good. Like that was just a wake up call. And I've had that wake up call time and time again. And so the final lesson is, if you've managed to get your first job and you failed and you swear to get better, and then you get your second job because you did get better, and you get your third job because you did get better, at a certain point, you're going to start feeling underappreciated. You're going to start to feel like no one's recognizing what you're doing. You're going to start to feel like no one's giving me the accolades, or no one's giving me the props. No one's giving me the awards or the recognition or the accolades or whatever, the Twitter followers, whatever the fuck people are talking about right now. And there is this recent advice that goes along with what I just said. And that is, if you are feeling underappreciated, it's a financial joke. If you are feeling underappreciated, you need to increase your value. So, like, you know, again, the answer always lies in doing better work. So if you're a creator and you're working and you're feeling like people aren't giving you the recognition you need, it's because you need to get better. And you can choose any which way. If you're writing and drawing, if you're a writer, if you're an artist, maybe you need to write and draw a book. If you're a writer, maybe you need to do something, whatever that is. Like, you just need to get better, because no one will, even if they loved you 5 years ago and then it feels like it's gone, maybe that's because you stopped getting better. Like a plant, if you look at a plant in high-speed chem work, it grows towards the sun or it dies. Like, there's no attrition. Like, like if you're not moving, you're dead. So you need to keep growing towards the sun, and maybe you'll burn out, and maybe one day you'll stop getting better. But I don't think you have to. I just think you just need to keep reaching towards that fucking sun, because the minute you stop, you're already dying.
There you go. Fuck yeah, dude. Yeah, that's amazing advice. That's so much truth behind that too. Damn, what a good ending to that episode.
I will accept no responsibility for any of your fates.
There it is.
That's the caveat. That's the caveat.
Put that warning right there.
Yeah. So you would basically say, as you continue your career, just keep growing to push yourself to be a better artist, whatever.
I'm saying it's hard, and you're going to struggle, and it's going to suck, and like it's gonna be horrible, but maybe that's the point.
Yeah.
You know, like I watched this nature show with the British guy or whatever, and there's these little fish, and they're like fish lizards, and they spend their like days flopping up this giant cliff, and half of them are falling off, and then finally a few of them get to the top, and what do they do once they get to the top? They just jump back down. Like, I think that's what it's all about. Like, I think the struggle is good. Like, it should suck. Like, it should be. Like, what's the most meaningful thing in your life? People say, oh, I climbed Mount Everest. It's like, yeah, that's meaningful if you're not the Burka doing it every day of your life, helping people climb that. But it's meaningful only because it's hard. There's no other reason it's meaningful to climb a mountain, only because it's hard. And it's like, if you apply that to your life, your art, it needs to be hard every day and suck. And sometimes you can feel good, but when you're feeling miserable, and you will, because if you're creative, you will dip down into the depths of depression and despair before you oscillate back up into the highs. It's like a wheel.
Yeah.
It's gonna half the time suck, but that's the point.
Yeah, you'll get those moments of this is bitchin', this is great, but then you're gonna go right back to it, and it's gonna go.
Yeah, that's just the top of the Ferris wheel.
You're gonna go to the next page, and you'll be like, oh, "Fuck!"
You're like, God damn.
Yep. That's it.
Kaare, dude, it's been fucking awesome talking to you. This has been
Thank you so much for that.
enlightening and super cool. Are you gonna be doing conventions once they start popping back up? Are you?
I don't think so. I think this year and a half of not doing conventions or whatever it's been is like has been enjoyable. So, like I love meeting fans, but the convention life is like I think it can be a bit of a trap for people. So
yeah,
it's like a different way of touring, right?
You will never be remembered for your convention appearances. You will only be remembered for your work. So return to core, do the work. That's my idea right now. Might change, but that's my idea.
Hell yeah. And it looks like we're going to see a lot more work from you, and I'm super excited. I can't wait to read the rest of Amazing Fantasy and see what you do from here.
Also check out Erratic from AWA. I just did 5 issues of that, and the graphic novel is available. It's a brand new company. It's pretty cool.
You can read the first comic, I think, for free on Comixology right now as well. The first issue of that. And check out. And if you haven't listened to our Spider-Man Rain episode, guys, go check that out and read that fucking book because it's so cool. Like, god damn it, it's such 4 issues. Check it out.
It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll see you around, and thank you so much. Thanks for being, guys.
Dude, thanks for being here. We really appreciate it.